Hi everyone, we are from Group 5. My name is Ajeng Larasati.
My name is Florien Hanifati Aganta.
My name is Lusiana Ganura.
My name is Alia Raihana.
Today, we are going to present an explanation that talks about public trust and accountability towards the E-Procurement process in response for COVID-19 to fulfill the midterm exam for public sector accountability courses. First of all, we would like to thank Ma'am Pradipna Unique and Ms. Rizky for the 5 weeks learning. It really helped us to broaden our perspective towards public sector accountability. Back to the presentation. So, in this video, we will present an explanation that consists of first, introduction.
Second, case study of E-Procurement toward COVID-19.
And then the next one is how it will affect the public trust and accountability.
And the last one is conclusion.
So, without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Enjoy!
As we know today, we are facing COVID-19, which is spreading faster than any other pandemic, while new diseases keep emerging. The previous one that we were thought to be controlled have returned, and maybe with new and more deadly strains. At the same time, public buyers all around the world need some goods urgently and at dramatically increased volume. In particular, the demand for healthcare materials such as face masks, protective gloves, ventilators, bed, medicine, intensive care materials, COVID-19 tests, lab supplies, and also hospital infrastructures has massively surged in the past few months. And the challenges presented by COVID-19 represent an opportunity to analyze and rethink the role of public procurement as a strategic tool to respond toward the real needs of the citizen. In this context, it is necessary to have adequate knowledge, the technological tools, and a technical instrument to strengthen the public procurement system, along with coordination and cooperation between key actors to face this type of emergencies. But what is e-procurement? E-procurement is the activity of providing goods and services through electronically or online. Before e-procurement, the provision of goods and services was carried out conventionally and it is need a long set of process. But now the process can be made easier and faster because it can be done through online. In addition, the procurement is a common process in a company. Meanwhile, e-procurement is the system that makes the procurement or the process more efficient. Companies that need goods or services in sufficient quantities will usually organize or negotiate agreements. The e-procurement system in Indonesia was built by the fund from the World Bank in 2004, and it is called National E-Procurement Government of Indonesia, and it is managed by the Communication and Informatics Department. And the first province that used this kind of system was Surabaya, and the trial of the system was initiated by the Department of Public Works in 2004. Based on the Presidential Regulation Number 8, 2006, e-procurement has 8 features, namely irregular tendering, e-reverse, e-purchasing, e-price quotation, e-reverse auction, e-direct purchasing, a selection, and e-catalog.
Indonesia is one of the countries that being affected by COVID-19. The disease has entered Indonesia since 2 March 2020 and has grown exponentially up until now. As of 22 October 2020, the COVID-19 has reached 373,109 cases among Indonesia people, and 12,857 had died due to the coronavirus. To mitigate known natural disaster of COVID-19, the government needs to publish several policies, such as government regulations in lieu of the Constitution Number 1 of 2020 concerning to the state financial policy and financial system stability to overcome the coronavirus pandemic, or known as in the Purple Number 1 on 2020. The regulation is one example of how to control the budget that will be dispersed to handle the pandemic, which amounted around 451 billion rupiah. The budget will be dispersed into four categories. The first one is to the health sector expenditure, which is amount about 75 billion rupiah. And then the second one is for tax incentive and stimulus for people business loans, or in Indonesia known as KUR, which is amount around 70 billion rupiah. And then followed by for the social protection, which is amount 110 billion rupiah. And then the last one is for economic recovery program, which amounted around 150 billion rupiah. The amount of the allocated budget by the government to overcome COVID-19 could potentially be misused if there is a foul control and also an amount of discretion taken by the public official, especially in terms of goods and service procurement. Hence, the Indonesian Corruption Watch, or known as ICW, developed an analysis to observe the potential fraud that occurred related to the goods and service procurement during the pandemic. This is done to give a recommendation to the policymaker to carry the procurement process without neglecting the principle and the ethics.
According to the ICW spending, the Health Ministry had 430 procurement plans related to COVID-19. It is worth around 800 billion rupiah as of July 21. Of the total, 247 would be funded by the Public Service Agency, 141 under the state budget, and the 34 under the revised state budget, and 8 from non-tax revenue. The state budget and revised state budget will fund the procurement of the 700 billion rupiah in COVID-19 related to product and equipment, almost 90% of the total procurement value. The ICW found that among 74 plans that would use direct procurement methods, which according to the Presidential Regulation number 16, 2019, that it should not exceed 200 million rupiah and can skip the open tender process. The 11 exceeded the stipulated budget limit of the 74 plans. The Health Ministry has only published 18 procurement realizations reports on the electronic procurement service system, with the available information lacking in details. The anti-graft Group C. And also among the reports published in the LPSE and ICW found that the 3 direct procurement plan had been realized, but that procurement plan had not been published beforehand. Moreover, the group suspected that some of the companies that had won some project through the tender process did not have adequate experience in the procurement of health-related products.
Calling COVID-19 a national crisis has had several consequences, both legally and in terms of coordination between agencies involved. The government introduced emergency legislation to respond to this health crisis. Leadership of the response efforts now fall under the National Disaster Management Agencies, or NDMA, which is under the President's command. NDMA can mobilize all kinds of resources, which are human, equipment, and logistic, and also organize public procurement. Around the world, countries are competing to procure whatever they need to address COVID-19, including test kits, personal protective equipment, medical needs for COVID-19, and more. In response, President Joko Widodo has instructed his cabinet members to accelerate the procurement process. The National Public Procurement Agencies, or NPPA, has issued a policy that allows government agencies to directly appoint vendors to procure goods and services during an emergency. The policy significantly cut down the length of the process from dozens to several days. Being able to move quickly is very important, but the government needs to act accountable and disclose procurement contracts. Without safeguarding measures in place, the COVID-19 allocated budget, which is 75 trillion rupiah, is at risk of inefficiency, fraud, and corruption. The NBPA policy requires the subnational and national government to specify needs to stop disease transmission. If this policy is accessible to the public, they can help monitor the procured goods, whether these are suitable to the response efforts, and whether there are any issues clogging supplies. Now we're gonna talk about how this issue relate with transparency, especially in decentralization policy. Decentralization policy has made the procurement process less transparent. Abusing power will slowly eliminate the transparency and accountability of the e-procurement system. It is because the public officials abuse their power to appoint a vendor because of their relationship with the vendor. And the other reasons, the public officials may get personal benefit from the vendors if vendors win the bidding process. One of the examples coming from West Sulawesi, Indonesia, specifically at the village of Salurindu, Butumalangka Subdistrict. The head of village used his authority to gain an advantage from the COVID-19 village budget for his own. The lack of transparency has resulted in gaps for corrupting budget dedicated to villagers.
So now we are in the part where we discuss about how the e-procurement system in terms of COVID-19 goods and services affect the public trust and accountability. The reformation of the procurement system has been conducted for many years because of many cases of procurement that creates the opportunity of fraud activities. Theoretically, the procurement system should be done transparently and can be monitored. Research in the procurement system find that e-procurement system are a good way to struggle the fraud or corruption. In order to reduce the corruption risk, the government must create and implement an e-procurement system to combat several fraud issues such as monopoly, power of governance, and information asymmetry. Transparency, accountability, and trust are the main issues in here. People need to understand that the cycle process of how to produce goods and services in the government areas. Lack of transparency and accountability create more opportunities for public officials to violate the rules and do corruption. Not only the public officials that have the potential to do corruption, but also the vendors is possible to do corruption or do something that is for personal purpose. The initial idea of the e-procurement system is to make people understand the process and oversees the procurement process to be free from corruption. Specific for the bidders, they want transparency in the bidding process, fairness of competition, and also fixed price contract. The e-procurement system provides an electronically bidding process known to all the bidders, which means selecting the bidding winner is known to all the bidders. Therefore, the public officials and vendors cannot perform collusion in the procurement. So by using this e-procurement system, it is theoretically supposed to gain public trust because of the transparent and monitor system. But different things happen in the e-procurement process in terms of goods and services in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. To understand more clearly and deeply about this case, we will try to examine it with accountability and trust that based on the Oxford Handbook of Public Accountability. First thing first, let's take a look on what is trust and its concept. So, as a highly ambiguous concept, trust created some confusion in several spheres, such as economic sphere, organizational theory, and also in the political sphere. And trust is highly variable across people, across time, across countries, and across space. According to Kim, in 2005, organizational trustworthiness in the public administration requires public-spirited employees who are competent, credible, and willing to act in the interest of public. And then Kim also developed a model of public trust and identified 5 dimensions of public trustworthiness. Those 5 dimensions, the first one is credible commitment, the second one is benevolence, the third one is honesty, the fourth one is competence, and the last one is fairness. To make you guys more understand about the dimension of the public trustworthiness, we already make a animation video for you, so let's take a look. After watching the video, we can use this dimension to assess the role of e-procurement in procuring goods and services or health device in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic on the public trust and accountability. If we look at the first dimension, which is the credible commitment, it seems that the Indonesian government unable to maintain the consistency between talk and action. E-procurement should make it easier for the citizen to know what the government is doing or buying. But in terms of goods and services for handling the COVID-19, the data is very difficult to find, even in online platform, which is the platform for e-procurement. It is unfortunately that e-procurement, which should be able to improve accountability, it's not transparent in this case. Even the budget budgeted for handling the COVID-19 pandemic has only been absorbed in very little amount. This shows that the talk and action between the government and the public has not been occurred, or in other words, that the government only talks but the action do not match with what is they say. They say what they are gonna do. The second dimension is benevolence. We don't think that the citizen feel the concern and care from the government because the government's lack of transparency regarding the procurement of goods and service related to the COVID-19 and also the corruption, such as corrupting the COVID-19 aid funds for personal gain, shows that the government does not care about its citizens and only care about themselves. How can there be a public trust if the government itself seems to provoke the people or the citizens with the action that have been mentioned previously, so that the citizens no longer trust the government? The third dimension is honesty. Honesty in e-procurement system is very important to gain the public trust. But unfortunately, again, the Indonesian government seems cannot be honest with their own citizens. The most obvious example is the budget budgeted for the COVID-19 pandemic that has only been absorbed very little. Why did this happen? We as the citizen know nothing because our own government seems to cover up what really happened. In fact, the cases of COVID-19 continue to rise and the impact in the various fields continue to rise too. because the government has not maximally absorbed the budget specifically budgeted for the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the procurement of goods and services that has not been maximized, such as the existence of medical device mafia that had shocked the public a few months ago. Dishonest from the government can also be seen from the corruption that occurred, as I have previously mentioned before. And how can people trust the government if the government is not honest with their own citizens? And the fourth dimension is competency. It can be said that the knowledge and skill of public officials in Indonesia to implement e-procurement, especially during this pandemic era, can be said that they able to manage and use the system. But there are still many irresponsible people who knowingly and consciously commit corruption or cheat the e-procurement system for personal purpose. One obvious example, and already discussed earlier, is the corruption case practiced by village head from the West Sulawesi, Indonesia, specifically at the village of Salurindu, Buntu Malangka Subdistrict. And the last dimension is fairness. We think that a fairness of government for their citizens in terms of a procurement system regarding goods and services in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic is quite equal, because indeed the citizens don't know what the detail regarding the procurement of goods and services for COVID-19, because the data is very hard to find even on online platform, which is the platform for e-procurement. It is a different story if it is the political elite who knows more about the detail of the COVID-19 procurement. So after relating these 5 dimensions with the procurement system as a system that can improve the public accountability, we can see that the level of public accountability in terms of the procurement of goods and services in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic is very low in Indonesia. And with this low level of public accountability, the level of public trust is also very low. It is because of high or low trust is affected by the public accountability. So next one will be the conclusion.
Okay, so back again with me. Now I'm gonna explain about the conclusion. So previously we already explained about the definition of e-procurement, and then also we related with the COVID-19 cases, and then we related as well to the transparency, trust, and public accountability. So after all, we learned that in the short term, e-procurement is known as the activity of providing goods and services through online. And then if we relate it to the COVID-19 process, just like what I already explained before, the government needs to publish several policies. However, according to the ICW organizations, they found that there are still a lot of problems in the e-procurement process. Moreover, they also found that several companies that had won some project through the tender process did not have an adequate experience in the procurement of health-related products. Even though there is a policy named the NPPA policy, which requires the subnational and national government to specify needs to stop disease transmissions by monitoring the procured goods. Of course, the government itself needs to act accountable and disclose procurement contracts, because back again, without safeguarding measures in the place, the COVID-19 allocated budget is at the risk level of inefficiency, fraud, and corruptions. Moreover, if we relate it to the transparency, just like my friend Alia have mentioned, we found that the centralization policy is the major problems for this one because it makes become less transparency. One of the reason it is because it makes the public official may get personal benefit from vendors if vendors win the bidding process. We took an example from the cases of the head of the village Salurindu. So he used his authority to gain an advantage for his own from the COVID-19 village budget. Lastly, we also explain about the e-procurement if we relate it to the trust and public accountability. So, e-procurement means that they provide transparency in bidding process, fairness of competitions, and fixed price contracts. However, from the data that we got, sadly, the Indonesian government seems couldn't show transparency yet in the e-procurements regarding to the COVID-19, whereas transparency, accountability, and trust are the main issues. Since the lack of transparency and accountability, we must remember that it might create more opportunities for the public officials and vendors to break the rule for corruption process.
That's all from us. Thank you for watching.